Hello everyone, with the release of John Wick Chapter 4 in cinemas, I thought it was a good time to take a look back at the John Wick Chapter 2 figure from Diamond Select Toys. DST have had a pretty narrow focus when it comes to this license. They've just produced the one character several times over in variant form for each film. We have John Wick from Chapter 1. He comes with this dog, which is pretty cool. Then we had John Wick from Chapter 2, which I'm going to take a look at today. We had John Wick from Chapter 3. And then we had this fancy super deluxe version of John Wick from Chapter 1. I have to say, this is a pretty nice figure all in all, and it's something of a best of from DST. Because it comes with all of the accessories from across all these different variants, plus it has some unique pieces including this chest and the coins as well. So I think this is very, very nicely done, but I don't own this, so today I'm going to take a look at the one I do own, which is from Chapter 2. So let's start with the packaging. Now this is slightly oversized packaging. It's not as big as some of the other Diamond Select toys that we've seen in the past, say the Marvel Select line for example, but it's definitely chunkier than you'd expect to see from, say, a NECA figure of the same scale. The packaging design is pretty straightforward. There's not an awful lot going on here. It's simple, clean lines. We have that simple John Wick logo at the very bottom there. Of course, this window display, and that is bordered by this sort of cyan-coloured box there. The rest of the colours, of course, are taken from the branding of Chapter 2. It's got that sort of disco lighting, the gradient between the purple and the blues, and this looks pretty attractive. This still looks pretty good, even though it's quite simplistic. The chunky side panel is much the same. Again, we have this window display, which I'm not really sure is doing an awful lot, to be honest. Perhaps this could have been better used if it actually had a poster from the film here. As it is, yeah, a side profile of the figure, I suppose, isn't the most exciting view in the world when you put this on your shelf. But if we look at the back of the packaging, we can see, of course, the figure in all his glory here. They've taken a stock photo, again, some more random imagery on the back of the packaging, and a little bit of bio about the character. And whilst this is all perfectly functional and isn't the most unattractive packaging in the world, it is a little bit bland and a little bit disappointing from a toy company that usually excels at their packaging. Anyone who has any experience with Diamond Select toys might recognise this suited body mould that we've seen before in lines like Ghostbusters and Gotham, and in my personal opinion, they've never been entirely successful. But before we get into that, let's start off by taking a look at this head sculpt. In terms of the likeness, it's not bad. I think this is definitely recognisable as Keanu Reeves. I don't think this is a terrible likeness, but at the same time, I would expect this to be a lot sharper from a toy company like Diamond Select Toys, who've done pretty excellent sculpts in the past. This is passable, but I expect a lot more from Diamond Select Toys, especially when it comes to paint apps. This looks a little bit lazy, really. There's not an awful lot going on here. Yes, there's little red patch marks around his face. I think this is intentional. I think this is meant to be blood splatter. I'm not entirely sure. It just looks a little bit unfocused and a little bit sloppy all in all. The body moulding and sculpting is absolutely fine, but it is very lazy. There's absolutely no paint apps on this whatsoever. Everything is sculpted in that matte black plastic, and there's no paint washes running through this whatsoever. The outer blazer, yes, is an extra layer that wraps around, but it's a very hard plastic, so it's not particularly malleable, but at least we can see lots of little details when it comes to the waistcoat, the tie, the shirt, and the belt, and there's a little bit of paint apps there where we can see the silver of the belt, and that's about all you get. And because there are no other real paint apps, no washes running over this, it does feel a little bit cheap, a little bit lazy. The plastic doesn't have a very nice texture to it either, which doesn't help. It feels very hollow and a little bit coarse to the touch. Plus, there's no real effort to hide any of these joints either, so you see every crack, every pin, and it just looks very unsightly. Articulation wise, I've no idea what's going on with this head. Yes, it will move from side to side, but there's so much resistance, it always wants to return to centre. I can't tell if this is meant to be a ball joint, but it can't really look up or down, or even particularly left to right. There is a ball joint in the shoulder, however, so his arms will lift up and out, and there is a bicep swivel here, which doesn't look great, but it it's functional. There's a double joint at the elbow. Again, doesn't look brilliant, does it? But there is a pin swivel at the wrist, so that wrist will rotate all the way around and it will hinge forwards and backwards, and this works and looks fine. Now, there's 2 points of articulation in the torso. There is a straight swivel at the waist, which if you persevere, you can just about get this figure to move from side to side, and you'll notice there's a ball joint in the upper torso area as well, but it's pretty limited. I can't really get this figure to move forwards or backwards or lean left and right. He has those very unpopular hips, which will allow him to kick out to the side, but again, looks pretty awful. There is an upper thigh cut though, which is good. The legs can kick forwards and they can go back a little bit, which is great. There's a double joint at the knee, so that lower leg can kick all the way back there. And then finally, there is an ankle rocker, which again, doesn't look fantastic, which will allow the foot to move from side to side and of course hinge forwards and backwards. Now, strangely enough, he's quite light in accessories. All he comes with is 2 twin pistols and 2 separate clips. Now, for a character who utilises a pretty diverse range of weaponry in the film, it's kind of disappointing that this is all he comes with. But to make matters stranger, if we look at the back of the box again, we can clearly see he's supposed to come with this automatic rifle. And if we look really closely at this image, something doesn't look quite right, does it? It looks as if this rifle has actually been photoshopped into his hand, almost as if they weren't quite sure what weapon to give him. So what happened here? Was I just unlucky, or was this a last minute run-in change? To make matters worse, he doesn't have the easiest time holding both of these weapons simultaneously. His right hand has that perfect trigger finger, it slots very neatly into his grip there and it looks really solid. But if we look at his left hand, this is a much broader, open gripping hand, and the gun will just about sit there, but the slightest knock and it's going to fall out of his grip. Also, I'm a bit baffled by these clips as well. They don't really fit into either hand. You're relying on gravity and they will just fall out at a moment's notice. And they don't slide into either of the pistols, so I'm not entirely sure why we got these. So, final thoughts from me. Well, all in all, I have to say everything about this figure is average. There's not an awful lot of effort gone into this figure, in my opinion. This feels like a very lazy release from Diamond Select Toys. It seems like they've reutilized various bits and pieces that have been used rather unsuccessfully in the past, cobbled them together, and just kind of got something out there. I'm not a huge fan of this head sculpt. It's not bad, but it should be a lot better. The accessories are disappointing, to say the least, and the usual standard when it comes to depth, texturing, detail, paint apps that we'd expect from Diamond Select Toys is curiously absent on this figure. Ironically, the articulation feels a little bit stiff, a little bit unmalleable, and the points that we do have definitely do hit the overall look and aesthetic of this figure. Now, all of that being said, I have been able to recreate some of those specific John Wick sort of poses that look pretty cool, and it does look pretty decent on display. But I suppose my ultimate gripe, my ultimate takeaway from this figure is that it just feels a little bit phoned in. It's a little bit lazy and a little bit of a rehash, and I feel like Diamond Select knew that this figure was going to be aimed at a slightly different audience, a slightly broader audience to those who would ordinarily collect 7-inch scale action figures. I think they thought this was going to have more of a novelty value to it, so maybe they didn't have to put quite as much effort into it. Now, I could be completely wrong, and that could be doing DST a complete disservice, and if that's the case, then my apologies, but it does feel like there's a definite drop in quality here than what we usually see. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.